Okay, so thank you very much, George, for the very nice introduction. Good afternoon, everybody. So first, I'd like to express the congratulations to the Portuguese Society for Materials for this initiative. So very nice idea to disseminate the work of the Portuguese ERC grantees in the area of materials. I have attended so far all the webinars of this series and they have been really great. So I'm pleased also to share with you some of our vision on how to use materials, but in the field of tissue engineering and regenerative medicine. And in particular, how this could be related with the ERC grants that I received so far. So as we are in the forum related with materials, let me just also publicize this journal, Materials Today Bio, which is from the very well-known series of journals from the Materials Today family from Elsevier. So we are working hard so that this journal could be a reference in the future on broad topics at the interface between materials and all bio aspects, from more fundamental to really applied ones, such as bioengineering and biotechnology. So please read and access to all the papers that are free, and also consider to apply maybe in the near future your manuscript. So I was wondering how to start this presentation, and therefore to keep it more simple, I decided really to start with the beginning, okay, with the beginning of my scientific career. So I had a unique chance to start with my PhD with a supervisor that was also my best professor during my chemical engineering degree in Instituto Superior Técnico in Lisbon, Professor Joaquim Moura Ramos. I know that there are master students in the audience, so I'd like to advise them, if you wish to go for a PhD, really try to choose wisely your supervisor and also the quality of the group where you are going to work. So the logo of Technic is still the old one, because this was old times. So my PhD thesis was related with the investigation of molecular dynamics in liquid crystalline polymers. So in that case, using dielectric spectroscopy techniques, so a lot on polymer physics, soft matters, molecular dynamics in condensed matter, and also glass transition dynamics. So this is the front page of my very first paper published in Polymer. You can see that, and you will see that my interests change a lot. But the important aspect is that I received at that time a very solid training on basic physical chemistry and material science that were also very, very important in the future. So then when I finished my PhD, I immediately joined the University of Minho in 1997. The logo is also the old logo of the University of Minho. So where I continue to work on polymer science aspects, more focus on glass transition and thermal behavior of macromolecules. Because I was at the Department of Polymer Engineering, I gradually try to combine this knowledge with structural aspects, so including crystalline morphology of thermoplastics and mechanical behavior, a little bit connections with processing, okay? So gradually I started also to collaborate with a group of biomaterials that was starting to be formed at the department, that was led by the former rector of the University of Minho, Professor Antonio Cunha. So those were very good years, okay, in terms of personal progression and science that we were doing. I was able to publish in nice papers in important journals in the field. That was also the time when I got the first PhD and postdoc students, and also the first international collaborators were established. My very first international collaborator was with Professor José Luis Gómez Ribelas from Polytechnic University of Valencia in Spain. They were doing a very good work in my research area, and it was very important in the initial stage of my career. So I always comment to young researchers and professors the importance of starting with very good and solid and reliable and pleasant groups of collaborators. And I was very lucky on that. So in this publication, just to give you an example that were published with the group in Valencia, we analyzed the effect of the extent of the crystalline structure on the glass transition of polylactic acid, which is a very well-known polymer used in several biomedical applications. So we discovered that the amorphous content between the crystalline lamellae in the spherulites presented a very different dynamic behavior as compared with the free or unconfined bulk amorphous phase. And we correlated the thermal results with detailed X-ray scattering data. And at that time, we got a project that allow us to access to beam time in the synchrotron in Hamburg. So anybody that collected data in the synchrotron will never forget the works in shifts for 24 hours, for several days, to obtain huge amount of results that will then be digested in the following months. And this was really an amazing and exhausting experience at that time. So my research interests at University of Minho continue. And with the time, I get more and more interested in the response of cells with biodegradable polymers. First with these polylactic acid and polyesters, but then with natural-based polymers. And we also proposed advanced strategies of using this kind of materials in regenerative medicine and other biomedical applications. So either at 3B's group at University of Minho, and then later at University of Aveiro, we work in topics that were related with smart systems, so systems that can be injected, stimuli responsive surface that could respond to temperature, pH, or other kinds of parameters, particles that can recruit specific cells or growth factors, shaped memory systems, but using soft materials, which is not so common. Also, we have been working a lot on trying to be inspired by nature. And we, for example, were and still be very recognizing the use of surface with extreme wettability that reproduce some surface that have super hydrophobic behavior, for example, and also some systems with strange and optimized mechanical properties, also bio-inspired, and also adhesives that are also biomimetic, supramolecular, and also a lot on trying to learn on biomineralization to develop systems, especially for bone repair. Also nanobiomaterials, so also, of course, nanoparticles, but there are so many groups working on that. Maybe we were more recognized in the field of trying or developing multi-layered coatings, nanostratified coatings using different polyelectrolytes, either as a coating or also to produce as well freestanding objects using these kind of technologies. And also more in the tissue engineering area, bottom-up approaches. Really try to start with small units and try to assemble them in more complex structures for different types of tissue engineering strategies. So in 2014, we work a lot on all of these topics. We decided to apply, I decided to apply for an ERC Advanced Grant. And in 2015, so 6 years ago, I got the news that everybody would like to receive, of course, that allowed me to start from the scratch a new academic project. And this was a personal decision to go to University of Aveiro. I invited a couple of really brave researchers to move with me to University of Aveiro, where we created a brand new group at CISECO to continue our adventure in the field of advanced biomaterials and bioengineering of human tissues. This is just for you to know the first selfie taken by Vitor on the day one of our arrival. So Vitor was only the one that was completely cut from the image. And that is why this picture was called the Everybody Elsie portrait of the starting of the Compass Research Group. So 1st of April, 2016. So in the last 5 years, our group increased in size and projects. So, and we did amazing things in the last 5 years. So an important area that was really was to give more emphasis to the role of cells in the repair process in tissue engineering strategy. So we call cell-rich constructs. So if we have the paradigm of combining biomaterials and cells, several researchers in the group in Aveiro are pushing this interface towards more the cell side. For that, we developed several concepts that I will not have the time to explain in detail, where we try to minimize the use of materials in terms of quantity or use. So these slides just present some examples crossing all dimensional levels at 0D. So this is an example of a silica-based coating of individual cells to allow them to survive in suspension. So in 1D, this is an example of fibers that are made entirely of cells, okay, that we called fibroids. In 2D, so this is an example of membranes that are just made of cells. that are produced by magnetic forces. So we are using external magnetic force to process these complex membranes, and just in 3D, a single examples where, for example, we developed ultra-thin microparticles with almost no volume, but with microscale level surface area that allow the attachment and assembly of cells in 3D. So that although we have a lot of cells, I would like to emphasize that the material's character is kept in all of the examples. And that it's why the editors of advanced functional materials, advanced materials, biomaterials, accepted to consider these works for publication. So, but I would like to speak much more on the ERC grant that we have been running. And it will be important to emphasize the relevance of biomaterials and their interactions with cells. So just to go for an analogy, the living of the American criminal couple, so it's Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow, was transposed into this Bonnie and Clyde movie from 1967, directed by Arthur Penn, so featuring Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway. So it's a very nice movie. He has a tragic ending. I'm sorry for the spoiling if you didn't see the movie. But this is really a story of a perfect partnership with an unconditional confidence and love, no matter the circumstances. So also we are working in tissue engineering, and we try to find our best biomaterials that could seduce the best way cells, forming a perfect pair to execute that they are supposed to do, okay, which is really to form tissues, for example, and all the times together. So the relevance of materials as platforms to support the attachment of the different cells outside an animal organ was first developed by Dr. Ross Harrison more than 100 years ago. He was an American biologist who used, for example, crossed spider web fibers to support embryonic cells outside the body of an animal. So this was a remarkable achievement that demonstrates the relevance of solid material supports in artificial tissue culture. So this has been very useful for culturing all types of adherent cells outside living organisms. But we needed to wait about 80 years to transpose all of this knowledge into technologies that could be used to engineering and to produce tissue and organs. So Robert Langer, which is engineering from MIT, and Joseph Vacanti, an academic surgeon from Children's Hospital in Boston, proposed the use of biomaterials to create temporary scaffolds where cells could be obtained directly from the patient. The cells could be cultured in the bioreactor together with the cells to the biomaterials, and the cells could proliferate, differentiate, and create a functional tissues that could be then implanted into the patient. So this is really the original illustration of the concept that was published in Science paper in 1993. So this other picture is also very famous at that time. It shows us the structure, the shape of a human ear made of a biodegradable polyester and seeded with human chondrocytes, the cells that generate cartilage, that was implanted in the back of a mouse. So scientifically, we cannot consider it an outstanding results, but this picture at that time was very important to disseminate the field of tissue engineering to the general public. And also it was very, very important for researchers that were working on more conventional biomaterials to move to a new field. So the concept of tissue engineering was really an absolute breakthrough in the field of regenerative medicine, and it has an immense potential. Those are just examples of well-known diseases or clinical conditions that are completely not possible to solve at all using current treatments, affecting tissue and organs from the musculoskeleton, cardiovascular, endocrine, for example, diabetes, or central nervous systems. Currently, there are researchers investigated either in universities or research centers or companies working on the bioengineering or all of these kind of tissues that could be really important to progress in medicine. So, of course, in this bioengineering process, the choice of biomaterials to support the development of the tissue is very, very important. And different groups in the world are working with different materials. Among the large choice of biomaterials, we really consider that natural polymers really offer a large portfolio of different types of structures that are, and this is very important, they are already engaged in the functioning of living tissue. They are often biocompatible, and some of the times they are biodegradable in the body. So for example, polysaccharides are very important and chemically versatile class of biomaterials. We also have been working with different types of proteins that can be used in a variety of tissue engineering application, and we will mainly discuss results obtained using human-derived proteins. So of course, those are just macromolecular structures, but if you want to really design materials, you need to process them into different shapes. So we have been working with many technologies to process biomaterials with different geometries from all dimensions, so from 0D to 3D, and also across all length scales, from the nano to the macro scale level. So many times we need to combine materials from the different squares that you can see. And I will show you at least one example on that. So these systems may be obtained, for example, using hydrogels, using most of the polymers that I present in my last slides, due to their very high water affinity, and employing, of course, we need to employ adequate cross-linking methodologies. So hydrogels are a very, very important class of biomaterials that are able to recapitulate many aspects of the mechanical, water content, biochemical environment that exists in the native cellular microenvironment. So we can control the architecture at the nanoscale level in order to, for example, control the interface with cells. We can also culture basically all types of cells in 3D inside these matrices. We could use hydrogels as reservoirs of therapeutic drugs and signaling proteins. And hydrogels are basically the ingredients that are used for bioprinting or as injectable hybrid devices for biomedical applications. So we have proposed, for example, the preparation of hydrogels from human-derived proteins. I highlight this aspect because it constitutes an important ingredient of some of our ERC projects, but of course we have been working with many other materials. So a good source of proteins is platelet-rich plasma fractions that can be obtained from the blood, from the separation of the different fractions. So upon cycles of freeze thaw, we can extract from the platelet-rich plasma platelet lysates that contains a potent cocktail of proteins with very interesting therapeutic potential. So we hypothesize that by chemically modifying such proteins, we could produce biomaterials that could, for example, respond to light or to other external stimuli, for example, to generate hydrogels on demand. So in general, it has been recognized that proteins may be more specifically in terms of the site where we want to do that, or broadly, they can be chemically modified using different types of chemistry. I'm not going into detail, you can see some examples, because they exhibit very interesting groups like thiols, carboxylic groups, hydroxyl, amine. So, and we can do a lot of modifications in order to. So for the particular case of proteins from platelet lysates, we modify the hydroxyls and amine groups of the proteins chains using methacrylic anhydride to introduce methacrylyl groups with a controlled modification degree that we could characterize, for example, using NMR. So the methacrylated platelet lysates that we called PLMA can form hydrogels using light activation if we use adequate photoinitiators in about 1 minute, and with the final mechanical properties that could be controlled, for example, by changing the concentration of the precursor or the extent of modification. So the photopolymerization may be performed through photomasks that will activate the PLMA solution that is below the photomasks only in the regions that allow the passage of light. So this spatial control of the cross-linking allow us to form hydrogels with highly tunable geometry and size. which can be very interesting for some application. So what is also important is that the photopolymerization can be performed in the presence of cells. So we can really include cells such as L929 or adipose-derived stem cells inside the precursor, and upon irradiation, they will be fixed in 3D. So both cells exhibit very good levels of proliferation and viability, as seen by DNA and MTA quantification, up to 7 days, but we have results for many other, much more time. So the micrographs shows that the encapsulated cells are spread and developed an adequate cytoskeleton organization, as you can see, for example, from this image, indicating that a very good communication with the adhesive proteins of PIELMA. So we are proposing, of course, such PIELMA hydrogels to engineering tissues for therapies, but we are trying as well to accelerate their use by exploring such systems to engineering disease models. So in this case, the main idea is to develop pathological tissue, not healthy tissues, where drugs or other treatments could be tested ex vivo. So this is really a research area that has been quite popular in the last 5 years to surpass the lack of correlation between preclinical tests using different types of animal models and the results of treatments directly in humans. So in a pure personalized strategy, so you can think that the hydrogel precursors would be fabricated with the blood of the patient. Tumoral cells also from the patient would be integrated into the microgels, and combination of drugs could be tested using high-throughput screening to find an adequate treatment for this particular individual. So this is very much more translational and more fast to go to the commercialization. This was really the base of the first ERC proof of concept that was granted 3 years ago, that is called Microbone. So we focus on the use of PIELMA to develop models for osteosarcoma, a very nasty bone cancer. So this ERC intended to deconstruct such organization and developed reliable 3D models based on PIELMA hydrogels, so the hydrogels based on platelet lysates. And we showed, for example, that in general, different cells encapsulated in such kind of hydrogels behave differently depending on the mechanical properties of the matrix that can be controlled. So everything can be highly tuned. So this kind of ERC grants, proof of concept grants, promotes the commercialization and the exploitation of the knowledge that generated by normal ERC grants. And as a result of these Microbone projects and other awards that we received, we founded the spin-off company MetaTissue in 2018. The MetaTissue is managed by Catarina Custodio, and it's going quite well, being involved in several projects, including European ones, and received several awards. And more recently, we expanded the portfolio of the sources of human-derived proteins, and we also proposed new photocross-linkable biomaterials, for example, obtained from the amniotic membrane. So we achieved a new ERC proof of concept grant, Amniogel, last year for such developments, and it will continue to run until February 2021. So this is really the more applied phase of our activities, but all of these proof of concept grants derived from a very first ERC advanced grant, Atlas, that intended to compartmentalize cells, not only in hydrogels, but in more sophisticated structures. I would like to share with you the main ideas. So in fact, when we speak about hydrogels, including in bioprinted structures, the survival of the cells will depend a lot on the size of the objects where they are encapsulated, because mass transport restrictions will limit the access of nutrients to the cells, especially in the inner regions far from the periphery. And moreover, the cells are really embedded in the elastic matrix, which usually limits the capacity of the cells to migrate and to proliferate. And this is really very important aspect if we want to engineering most of the tissues where the cells really should proliferate and self-organize into the tissues that we want. So an alternative would be to have cells compartmentalized not in an elastic matrix, but in a more liquid or viscous milieu to exclude these disadvantages. So this hypothesis could be supported by the fact that relevant processes in biology and in living systems are taking place in liquefied compartments. For example, inside cells, very complex enzymatic processes are taking place in these kind of vesicles that are called lysosomes, and even cells that where we can observe some intracellular mobility are quite viscous inside. If we also look on development, we can recognize that embryos grow in liquefied compartments such as in eggs or in placenta in more complex organisms, always liquefied environments surrounding the living that is being formed. So we have proposed the concept of liquefied capsules with adhesive sites for anchorage dependent cells to bioengineering this kind of artificial placenta for tissue development. So these devices are enveloped with a perm-selective membranes that allows for the entrance of nutrients and the exit of wasting products and assure the compartmentalization of cells in a highly flexible structure. So the cells are completely free to migrate and explore the entire volume inside the capsules. We can include any molecules or materials we wish to inside the capsules, including particles with different shapes and mechanical properties. So it's a very, very versatile platform. So these small liquefied biofactories are really the basic units of the Atlas project. So we propose them as regenerative elements focusing on bone repair. So we illustrated the main idea in the cartoon, helping to promote the project to the general public, so something that the European Commission like a lot. Here you can see a patient with a critical bone defect that will be treated with these capsules. In this case, we use an injection, the magnification of the capsules. You can see a possible ecosystem inside, where you can see microparticles, different types of cells that are communicating between them, recapitulating the bone niche. Some stem cells receive signals from endothelial and immune cells that will promote their differentiation into osteoblasts that will calcify, and organization of the endothelial cells into primitive tubular-like microvessels. So during this process, the membrane covering the capsules will be disrupted with time, and the mature microtissues will assemble into large macro tissues that could integrate with the surrounding tissue, including the vasculature. And we hope that it will lead to the regeneration of the bone defect. So now, for real things, the methodology for producing these capsules have been based on the processing of alginate microgels. So this is the way we have been working so far. We are now developing a new way to do that. And this was published quite recently, but I will not go on details in this sense. So in this case, we just spray micro droplets of these alginate solutions that contain cells, the microparticles, all the ingredients that we want to have in the final capsules. So these liquid droplets will be jellified when they are contacting these precipitation baths that contain calcium ions. So the calcium will cross-link the alginate, and so we can generate micro beads of alginate that contains the cargo that we want. And then what we do is to coat the beads using layer by layer technology. So we have been using alginate, chitosan, and polylysine to coat, and depending on the number of layers and the nature of the polymers, we can have a coating with different properties, and this will be very important in the end in terms of mass transport and degradation. So, and then finally we go for a core liquefaction. We use ETTA, that is a chelating agent for calcium, to liquefy the core. Of course, the membrane will be intact and will protect everything. So if the ingredients inside the capsules are very well defined from the very beginning, we anticipate the formation of a micro tissue in the very autonomous way. So we can vary several processing parameters, such as the spray voltage, the flow rate, the diameter of the needle, the distance to the collector, or the alginate concentration. And so in this case, we can control the size of the capsules between, I would say, 200 micrometers up to 1 or more millimeters. So the definition of the initial cells that are already inside the capsules is very relevant for the type of tissues that we want to form without the intervention of any external factors, such as differentiation medium. So we would like to avoid that. For example, if we include just human-derived stem cells together with particles that were coated with collagen type 1 and culture the capsules in normal medium for 21 days, we could not see any development of mineralization. So in these kind of monocultures, as you can see, we don't see any staining, red staining in this alizarin red staining, nor the presence of osteopontin. So in here, you don't see any green, and osteopontin is really a sign of osteogenic differentiation. So the cells were kept viable, but maintained the stemness. So we still have stem cells after 21 days. However, when we culture stem cells with endothelial cells, we could see after 21 days calcium phosphate deposits that are produced inside the capsules, and we clearly detect osteopontin, therefore indicating a trend for the osteogenic differentiation. So this was in vitro. So in vivo experiments were also performed by implanting this kind of capsules subcutaneously in a nude mice model. So I will just show you one example, one slide, where we analyze the explants of the region of the capsules that were retrieved after 6 weeks on the back of the mice. In the monoculture, we could not see too much collagen form, neither the presence of calcium nor osteopontin. In contrast, in the co-culture conditions, more collagen could be seen. Massive calcification were produced by the human cells in the place where there is no bone. So this is really calcification provoked by the human cells, and also much more osteopontin. So this is really an indication that the cellular ingredients can be very important to generate the intended tissue that we want to engineer. So in the last 5 years in Aveiro, we were able to progress on this type of technology. We include different types of cells, including endothelial cells outside the capsules or macrophages. We tested culturing in dynamic condition using bioreactors. So I could stay a lot more time to discuss all of this work, but just to the time restrictions, I'm just highlighting the possibility of having non-spherical capsules using patterned superhydrophobic slides with very defined geometry. So in this case, the microgels of alginate are not spheres, but they have very, very well-defined geometry. So even after the layer-by-layer coating and liquefaction, we could see that the geometries could be kept. And so we think that using this kind of elements as building blocks, we could assemble larger structures, such as in the Tetris or Lego game. So this, I'm showing specifically these results because this is really in the core of the new ERC advanced grants that was financed and will start in October. That it's really on trying to recapitulate the complexity in living tissues, because as you know, most of the tissue and organs are really multicellular and organized in a very hierarchical way. And this is seen in most of all anatomic sites in the body. So being inspired by this kind of hierarchical organization, we can think on using bottom-up strategies to join small elements such as the liquefied capsules or microgels into large structures. So different techniques have been proposed, such as the connection of building blocks using layer by layer or surface chemical bonding. External fields can be used to assemble the building blocks using acoustic or magnetic fields. We can use layer by layer assembly. We can use geometrical locking of pieces obtained by photolithography, or for example, using 3D processing using, for example, bioprinting. Our obvious next move would be to use our artificial liquefied biofactories to build this kind of more controlled macro tissues with more complex structures. So this was, of course, considered, and we started to thinking on that before 2019. So the preparation of the proposals that is called Reborn. So I really had a very, very useful help from a wonderful group of people that was essential for the preparation of this proposal, together with a very good organization of all the process. So the Reborn proposal preparation team was composed by Tiago, Catarina, Vitor, Mariana, Clara, Sónia, João, Sofia, Isabel, Sara, Nadine, Lúcia, Pedro, Sara, Santos, Inês, Matias. I cannot find a picture of Matias, and Sara, Nadine. So they were very, very important in this process. So the proposal was submitted in September 2019. I received the email with information of the evaluation of Reborn on 19 March 2020, the day before my birthday. When we were all locked down at home in the first confinement. So of course, when we receive this kind of email, we get very nervous. So impossible to remember the password, okay? But finally I could, of course, go to the results and I could check the positive evaluation and that the project was granted, okay? So everybody was very happy. So the main ingredients of Reborn, in contrast with Atlas, is that the source of materials is quite different than cells. So all of materials and cells are expected to be obtained from perinatal tissues, including amniotic membrane, umbilical cord, and umbilical cord blood. So we have an agreement with Aveiro Hospital to receive such kind of highly potent biological materials that are usually discarded after the birth of the babies. So I will not, of course, go into details, but the main idea is that the liquefied pockets that we can obtain can be integrated into large structures, either by 3D bioprinting to generate 3D constructs, or into more pseudo 2D membranes that could be interesting to guide bone regeneration, okay? More 2D membranes. So these devices are quite hierarchical. So if you look, for example, in the bioprinting structures, the hydrogels binds the liquefied pockets and it will stimulate the integration with surrounding tissue, including vascularization. And inside the liquefied pockets, we have particles we call microblocks that will help to sustain cell proliferation and cell behavior. They will be also bioinstructive. And again, everything should be very well designed from the very beginning to generate the tissue, the micro tissues that we want. So I would like to speak about the 2D and 3D assembly processes that, that we are going to use. And I can speak because they were already validated in our group. Of course, we are going to do some progresses, but the bases are already known. And so I would like to start with the pseudo 2D membranes, okay? How the ideas were generated to produce this kind of membranes or living membranes that could be used for guide bone regeneration. And this is first the first example. So, and this is like a story, okay? When I discussed with the students the variety of pollen textures, okay? Pollen textures in this case you don't see, but usually they have a very beautiful texture. And we were analyzing that in order to try to produce microparticles with this kind of textures. So I noticed not the aspect of the surface, but from this kind of images and pictures, the way the pollen granules are fixed by the hairs of the anabeans. Okay, so you can see the hairs that you can see in the legs or the abdomen of the bees. They have these hairs. And what we could see is that there is a very good match between the distance between the hairs and the diameter of the pollen objects. So we speculated that this is a very interesting way that nature thought, and this was through evolution, and this is a way that nature found a way to fix physically microparticles, allowing, for example, the bees to carry the pollen from one flowers to the other. Okay, so this was our speculation. This was never reported before, and we saw, for example, from these very nice pictures from these photographs, Charles Krebs. I contacted him, and he was very kind to allow us to use this picture in the publication, in the work that was published. And it was published 2 years ago in Proceedings of National Academy of Science. And this was the results of the master thesis of Lúcia Santos, our very first master student in Aveiro, and now she's a PhD student. So from the observations of the bees and the pollen that are fixed naturally, we prepare biomimetic membranes, also composed by this air topography, that we expect that could allow for pure mechanical fixation of micro objects. So this kind of membranes were processed by photolithography using PDMS to obtain flexible supports. So we hypothesized that the particles smaller than the distance between the pillars will not be able to fix due to the lack of mechanical locking. Bigger particles could block the fixation of other particles, and so the number of particles that could be grabbed should be also small. And again, we could speculate that if the particles have similar size of the distance between the pillars, we should have a higher efficiency of encapsulation. So of course, I'm not going into details, but we prepared particles of polycaprolactone with very controlled size, with 40, 80, and 160 micrometers. And we fixed them into the membranes with the pillars with a similar distance of the 3 sizes. And we measured the entrapment efficiency in order to check if the results, the hypothesis was really valid. So to go faster, I will go for a color map. I think it's much more easy to see. So you can here visualize the entrapment efficiency that increase with the increasing in the green darkness as a function of the micropillar spacing, S, and the microparticles diameter. You can see that you have more entrapment efficiency in this diagonal. The diagonal corresponds to the matching between the 2 sizes, okay? It's also clear that depending on the height of the pillars, so we tested 100 and 300 micrometers, that anytime when we have 300 micrometers, we have more efficiency of entrapments. And this is because you have a much better packing of particles, so you can accommodate more particles if you have taller pillars. So we also analyze the influence of the flexibility of the pillars on the entrapment efficiency by controlling the elastic modulus of the elastomer of the membranes. And we could see, for example, that intermediate flexibility fixed more particles. So such kind of platforms are, we believe that are really adequate to fix physically high quantities of solid particles or powders by tailoring the arrangement of the pillars, so the distance, the height. So even after shaking a membrane that was put in contact with this kind of powder, brown powder, the entrapment of the microparticles on the surface is really efficiency. So we can imagine multiple applications of such technology. For example, we can think on, we explore the possibility of entrapping antimicrobial drugs or microgels encapsulating these drugs. And we used for that alginate microparticles that contains tetracycline. So these membranes could be used as antimicrobial patches exhibiting these properties just in one of the face of the membrane. So I'm not going into details, but we show that the inhibition zone in an agar plate culture with both gram-negative and gram-positive bacteria was visible in the expected cases where the drug was present in the patch. So we tried to evolve, to go a little bit further, and we developed this kind of membranes, not based on elastomers, but using hydrogels. And we received an award to explore the potential of these systems as antimicrobial patches. So of course, instead of particles with drugs or other kinds of elements, we can also explore this kind of systems to entrap our liquefied capsules, okay? So this is the base also on one of the tasks of Reborn that we are executing. So this is really to develop this kind of living membranes that could be fixed around the bone defect, promoting the guide regeneration of the tissue. So this was for pseudo 2D membranes, but let's look at on what we could do on 3D. And for that, of course, the more logical technology is 3D bioprinting. So 3D bioprinting has been very, very popular in the last years in the field of tissue engineering. So bioprinting permits the formation of hydrogels containing cells in situ with a very controlled geometry. Most of the time, the methodologies are based, like what you see in the video, on the sequential and layer-by-layer depositions of hydrogel structs using the supporting base, and the construct is developed vertically from the bottom to the top. However, recent strategies have been proposed to bioprint complex structures with free-form shape maintenance. So in this case, a support material like the one that you can see in rows provides a 3D environment in which the hydrogel inks can be deposited in gravity-defying spatial arrangements. So usually they are based on the use of beds of gel microgels, so very small microgels that are packed together, through which the bio-ink is extruded independently in the 3 orthogonal axes. And this allows basically to process any type of structures in the space, not limited in terms of the starting point from the bottom to the top. So in our group, we developed a pure continuous viscose support that allows the fixation of complex centimeter scale 3D constructs with arbitrary design, as you can see from this, not bioprinting, but hand printing. In this case, the green liquid is an alginate solution that is instantaneously cross-linked by the calcium ions that is present also in the supporting bath. So this is, of course, very simple structures, but we can process much more complex objects using bioprinting, such as this asymmetric like structure that is similar to a vascular arterial structures that can be generated using a CAD model. The support bus that we use to process this kind of structures is made of a solution of xanthan gum, which is a polysaccharide. So this solution exhibits a shear thinning behavior. So this property is very important for this case because it offers the little resistance for the local extrusion of the bio-ink. So after the passing of the needle, that can go very easily because locally the viscosity will decrease, but after the passing, the viscosity will be restored to a higher value in the resting phase, allowing the fixation of the previously deposited extrudate. So we could see that these kind of structures can be then isolated from the supporting bus because xanthan gum is water soluble. So we just wash with water and we can obtain the final structure. So we could check that during printing the alginate systems, cells could be included in the structures. They could be maintained in terms of viability. So this is really important to show that this kind of technologies offers the unique possibility to really create volumetric out-of-space constructs with very high speed, which is also a very important property, and also with a very good printing fidelity, and also exhibit low cytotoxicity for cell bioprinting. So this is really a way to pave the way for the development of new systems in the future. So in conclusion, I think I cover many aspects that is related with technologies that will be used now in the Reborn projects that will start very, very soon. And we hope to present new exciting results in the coming years. So this is really the future. So imagine that what we envision to develop in the field of regenerative medicine could be used in the past. So Beethoven could have been able to listen his 9th symphony. Van Gogh could have his right ear back. George Louis Bosch could have been able to read his own contus. And Christopher Reeves could have been able to shoot his 5th Superman movie. So I'm finishing this presentation with another cinema reference, okay? So finally, I would like, of course, to thank all the collaborators, the fundings, not only the ERC, but also other funds from national funds and also from Europe. I always like to, of course, acknowledge all the people in the group that is working very hard in these very difficult conditions. And finally, thank you very much for your attention. So you can follow our activities through our webpage and social media like LinkedIn, Instagram, and also Twitter. Thank you very much for your attention.